Hi, my name is Llyn Hunter, Llynhunter, and today we're going to finish painting a drawing that we started. This is a pair of West African wild dogs, and what I'm doing right now, this particular paper is 150 pound or 300 gram watercolor paper, and it might buckle while I'm painting. So what I'm doing is I am taking Scotch Magic Tape, and I don't want just any cellophane tape. Scotch Magic's the best stuff for pushing down and peeling back, but all I'm doing is I'm taping it down to a piece of regular corrugated cardboard. This is basically a small piece of paper, so it's 4 by 6 inches. So I'm not worried about it pulling up too much. And all I'm doing is, again, this is Scotch Magic Tape. This is how I'm stretching my watercolor paper. That's like, I don't do anything more dramatic than this. And this will be enough that if the paper does buckle a little bit, when it dries, it'll dry flat. So that way, I don't use waterback tape or anything. Scotch Magic works great. And if you've got a larger piece, what I like to use is the back side of a canvas board. They're pretty cheap. They're about a couple of bucks usually a piece for, it's canvas wrapped in the front, usually used for painting with acrylics. And the back side's got paper on it. So it's a very good, strong piece of chipboard underneath. And it holds the water pretty dang well that way. Okay, well, we're going to start today. This is, like I said, this is an African wild dog. I've got reference material for their colors off screen, but we're going to stick to a very limited palette because we're dealing primarily with earth tones here. I usually like to use a limited palette anyways, but with these guys, we're going to start with the background, and I'm going to be using, this is raw umber. We're going to put some, let's start out actually with the background here on this one first. And with a little bit of line work on the grasses in the background. And I'm just going to start out with a little bit of it first. And why I'm starting out with the background is actually no particular reason. I could start out with the animals first and then put the background in second. Sometimes it works best to go one way, sometimes it goes best to work the other way. The rhyme or reason to it usually depends on the amount of subject matter you've got and the colors you're going to use. When you're painting in watercolor, you always want to go from light to dark. You always want to, you're layering. So if you put too heavy a coat of paint on first, it gives you nowhere to go and it gets you muddy. Most of the colors they'll start getting muddy at some point. So if you start your layering relatively light, then you can build up darker. I also have a tendency to work on yellows and your greens as much as possible first, your lighter colors in other words, and you don't get into purples or the darker colors, purples, blues, or darker blues until an end of a painting. It's just because more than anything else, especially with the yellows, they're the ones that are going to end up getting altered the moment you add color to them. Okay, so we're starting with the yellow in the background. But what I'm going to do is I want the sky to be a little blue-gray. I don't want it to be totally blue. I want to have just a little touch of blue to it. I'm going to put just a teeny bit of cobalt in some water. And I'm going to kind of dab it into the sky here. And I like to do a kind of a stipply edge a lot of times with my backgrounds. Primarily because if your watercolor goes weird on you, which it will. I mean, sometimes you'll get voxing in places that you don't want. And it'll do things that you don't want it to do. If you're doing a stipple of any kind in an open area, you can always add stipple to where the foxing happened. And it won't look like you've had any kind of accident. It'll look like that's the texture that you decided on putting in the painting. Okay, you can tell I'm painting, in some places I'm painting over that raw umber, and some places I'm painting between the raw umber. Whenever you get the white of the paper coming through on a painting, it'll always add sparkle to a watercolor. It won't just add white, it'll add a bit of sparkle. Now I'm using the paper we're using here again, even though it was initially used for the ink drawing, is an Arches hot press 150 pound or 300 gram watercolor paper. So it's again, it's a good thick paper. It's not quite as thick as, say, a Bristol, but it will hold the paint well without doing too much buckling. So even when you don't have it stretched down, say I didn't stretch down the piece of paper before we started, it still wouldn't buckle much. It'll buckle a little, but not much, just because of the weight of the paper. So whenever you're painting in watercolor, my biggest recommendation, spend the money on the paper. Spend the money to get some good paper. Spend the money on the brushes. The brush that I'm using right now is a Winsor Newton Series 7. It's a zero brush. It's a rather small brush. Not terribly expensive as Series 7s go. But what Series 7s are is they're made out of mink hair. They're made out of sable hair. And there's something in sable fur. It's not just the oil. I promise you it is not just the oil, because I've had, this brush is probably, that I'm painting with right now, is probably at least 5 to 7 years old. And I've beaten it up. And I can promise you the oil that was originally in it is probably long gone. But there's something about a sable natural brush that is like no other. It just doesn't work in the same fashion that any kind of other kind of brush does. And I'm a big fan of Winsor Newton Series 7. I still haven't found a brush I like better. So I kind of stick to them. Winsor Newton's been making them for hundreds of years as far as I know. I'm not sure. You'd have to Google when the first Series 7 brush was made. Okay, I want to get this a little bit more green in here. So we're going to add some water, and this is going to get all, basically, a little bit more yellow in there. I said green, but it will go green because I'm going to add some more blue in there too. But you'll note, even though, see, with the raw umber, it's a heavy pigmented color. So even though it's a yellow-brown, it did not go real green when I added that blue. It stayed pretty yellow. And that's the nature of, it's an earth tone. Some yellows, you add blue to them, they'll immediately go really green. But again, especially since we're dealing with animals here, this is going to be earth tones anyways. And the wild dogs are basically, the color in them is raw umber, sepia, and white. They're really amazing animals. I mean, the Western African wild dogs especially. The Eastern, some of the other, there are 5 subspecies of this animal, and the ones that are further to the east have more of a muddy color in their coat. They don't have this the yellow ochre, and they're not quite as pretty. I think that you know, if and some people would not consider the wild dogs pretty because they have a very odd look to them. They have these big round bat ears, and they're very skinny. They have long legs. So the thing is that because of their mottled coats and interesting muzzles, some people would not actually consider them pretty. I personally think they're gorgeous animals. Okay. And now I'm laying down the yellow ochre here in kind of a loose like coat over their top, because the white when the white comes into the spots and into the detailing on them, it has a tendency to be in the front and their undersides. So the modeling of the spots on the back is in more of a burnt umber tone, and then it goes to white under the black on the underbelly. So the spots on the back, again, will be more the raw umber and black, and then it'll go to black and white underneath. And they have black muzzles, and of the ones that I've noticed, they have a stripe down the center. They've got a black stripe. They all have this black stripe down the center of their forehead. Now that might be because of the photographs I'm looking at are of a particular pack, but I think that's kind of endemic to the coat color. And that's some of the things that you notice. It's like when you're striping tigers, or when you're striping zebras, there'll be some similarities in all zebras, or especially when you're talking about a specific variety of zebra. The striping will be similar, and if you look at the reference material, you'll figure out which ones are one particular striping over another particular striping. But these guys, one of the reasons why they hide in the grass so well is because they're the same color as the grass. The cool thing about the wild dogs, these guys, from what I understand, there are only a couple of thousand of them left in the wild, and it's primarily because they're long-range runners. They have, in order to get a kill, they have to literally chase down their prey, not like the way a cheetah does, but they harry it to death. It's like gazelle and impalas, those kind of ungulates. They are great at evading their prey by quick evasive maneuvers, and they can walk for great distances, but they get overheated fast, whereas the dogs, they can pant. If you ever seen, I don't know if you've ever seen a goat, or I have deer in my area. They will occasionally pant, but they don't have the capacity to pant like a dog does. So the thing is these guys can actually cool their bodies off by panting, whereas their prey can't. So they will chase them a distance, and they will keep running after them and running after them and running after them until basically they've exhausted them. And the only problem with that is that if you have humans that, they've set up their territories in places where basically the dogs can't do that kind of hunting anymore. And since they've evolved to hunt this way, they're going to run into a problem when they, crossing large distances is not going to be feasible anymore. So that's one of the reasons why these animals have become endangered. Now the other thing is that's interesting, well, there are a lot of interesting things about these creatures, but they were originally mistaken as hyenas. Hyenas are actually, now there is a group that's unusual and interesting. Hyenas are somewhere between cats and dogs. They're actually kind of more closely related in some respects to cats than they are to dogs. They're actually their own kind of carnivore. They've got some unique features of themselves. But these guys were mistaken as a kind of hyena at one point. However, they are not. One of the reasons that might have been is because hyenas don't have... Hyenas that are closely related to cats do not have retractable claws. These guys don't either, but what they don't have that all dogs have is they do not have dew claw. Dogs technically have 5 toes. You have 5 fingers on your hand, and dogs have 5 toes on their front and rear feet. It's just the 5th toe usually is not touching the ground and is known as a dew claw. Whereas these guys have evolved away from having a dew claw, and they believe it's because of the pursuit tactics that is part of their hunting technique that they've evolved out dew claw. Now, as you can see right now, as the I'm doing basically spots that are black encircling the burnt umber areas. Now I didn't do that all with the ink because with the wild dogs that black is not just pure black. It is a mottled gray. It'll go anywhere from a charcoal black to a light black. It'll go to, see, I'm doing like a really black spot, and then they'll have like little circles like leopards. So it's like somebody mixed a dog with a leopard the way some of their spotting goes. And in this area, we're going more towards the feet. There'll be black rings around the burnt umber, and then there'll be little like white patches and white spots too, like that. So they have these marvelous mottled coats. And there's a little black around their toes, black toe pads. This particular one has quite a white chest, and then they'll have little spots on their chest too. So I have a Basenji. One of my dogs is a Basenji, and when they're born as puppies, my Basenji is a red-white. And what happens with age is, especially after they do shed, even though they've got very short hair, they do shed. And after the winter and they have their summer coat, they get polka dots. They literally have, where it's normally white on them, it becomes polka dotted. And the puppies aren't that way. The puppies will have just a red and white coat. But as they get older, the more polka dots show up. Now, here's where there's like this black stripe down the center of their forehead. Of course, give them more of a black. His nose blacker. And dogs are always black around the edges of their mouths. Find me a dog that doesn't have a black edge around its mouth. Actually, there are some. I shouldn't say that. Vizslas are all red. Vizslas are Hungarian hunting dogs, and they are all red around their mouths. And red noses, and red bodies. You see a hunting dog that's all red, I can almost promise you it's a Vizsla. For some odd reason, in my area, we seem to have a lot of them. Not a large Hungarian population that I know of, but got lots of Vizslas. Anyways, So you can tell, this is where I was talking about the bat ears. Got these big bat ears. All together to hear you with, my dear. It's a sad thing that, you know, we have such endangered populations of animals on our planet. And it's even sadder, it's like I knew it was going to happen in my lifetime, but I didn't realize so soon. The black rhinoceros has gone extinct in the wild. And don't know if that one will be able to be brought back for any good time. The one that's really good that's recently, and I'll have to do a painting of that sometime soon, is the black-footed ferret. Okay. Now, he's got a black face, and I don't want it to be hiding. Okay? Thing is that when you've got a photograph, this part of the face will actually have reflective light on it. And this is a small painting, so you can't, reflective light's a tough thing to get in a small painting. So, but what we can do is I'm going to fill in that black, and then I'm going to come in, I'm going to blot, just blot up the top. There we go. So what I did was, this is, you know, your standard paper towel. Always have a paper towel in my my left hand for taking the water out of my brush and for blotting purposes. So I'm always utilizing that. Nice. He's got this particular pup's got black down the front. And then he's white. And the thing is that because, you know, all the animals have different coats, I don't have to follow. I'm using a reference photo, but I'm not following it precisely, because that would be kind of difficult in one respect. It's like I'm not using this as a identification piece so that you can find this is wolf 1235 in the wild, and we can tell it because it's got this coat. That's not the point of this painting. The point of this painting is to give an idea of what the coat somewhat looks like. Like I said, the yellow is on the top with black modeling, and then it tends to go more white towards the belly. The bellies will be white, legs will be white with black and yellow modeling. So as long as you get that information through, it will come across as the type of animal you want to come across as, this being an African wild dog. And this is the only wild dog, quote unquote, in Africa. Jackals are more like coyotes. It's like they're of their own group. They're of their own family. There are a lot of jackals in Africa, and there are golden jackals and striped jackals, and I think there's one other kind of jackal, which are very common. But they're not fox, they're not coyote, a jackal is a jackal. Just like a wild dog is a wild dog and a hyena is a hyena. They don't interbreed with each other. I don't even know if you can get hybrids out of them. I don't know if they compete. It's like hyenas have a tendency to steal from wild dogs. If a wild dog pack takes down an antelope, the hyenas might come and basically steal the prey that the wild dogs have just taken down for themselves. That's very, very common among hyenas. They do the same thing with lions. They will kill their own food, but they are notorious for stealing other animals' food. So you can see I'm just about done with the coats on these guys. And you can tell that they really are beautifully modeled coat. Have beautiful model coats. And then what I'm going to do for my last pass on things is I will go in and shadow them up with a little bit of blue, green. Probably, I'm trying to decide right now whether I want to use Prussian blue or whether I want to do purple. I always like to do either purple or blue shadows, or maybe a little bit of both. Right now, I'm going to go back in the background and finish up the background. But I'm going to go over, give the background a little bit more blue. So that hopefully the pups will stand out a little bit more. Started with a little bit of cobalt. That went a little bit too green for me, so I'm coming back with some Payne's Gray. I'm going to use Payne's Gray. It's okay if it goes a little bit green. It's not what I originally intended, but hey, that's okay. Here's the advantage of watercolor. Nobody knows what you originally intended. And when you're painting, it's like whatever it comes out. It's amazing how sometimes when you're not particularly pleased with what you did, somebody will look at it and think it's the best thing that ever happened, because they don't know what you were intending. They just see a painting before them that really looks nice, and so they don't have to know that the thing that you were trying to do isn't what you achieved. And sometimes a painting will do exactly what I want it to do, and when it does that, it's like, oh my god, I'm happier than heck. And then sometimes it just won't. No matter how much I try to get it to go a particular way, it just doesn't turn out the way I wanted it to. But more often than not, the paint surprises me. It's amazing. Like with this piece right here, when I get done with it, the colors won't be fully set until it's probably about 45 minutes to 2 hours old. Because at that point, when all the colors have congealed, when the whole thing is dried, and it's laid down its final look, things will have dried lighter than I expected them to. Things will have dried darker than I had expected them to. Things will fox in ways that I hadn't expected while I was painting it. And most of the time, I can honestly say it turns out better than what I had expected. It paints itself. One of the things about watercolor is if you let it do what the paint does, just let it be, let the accidents happen, it's amazing how you didn't intend something to happen, and it's like, oh, that's just what I wanted, and it came out, and I just wasn't expecting that, and that's just what I wanted. That's when everything's wonderful. And more often than not, you'll find that that is what watercolor does. It'll give you things that you just weren't expecting. Now, I'm laying in some Payne's Gray here. Payne's Gray is again, one of my favorite colors to add as shadow, add as a subtle tone, to gray things down, because I don't like... I have a tendency to oversaturate colors, and Payne's Gray will help me desaturate my color a bit, and still keep, it'll keep a rich blue in it. So I kind of like what Payne's Gray does for me. Okay, now I think I'm going to come in with a little bit of purple in the shadows. And the question is how purple, how blue do I get it? Purple is one of those colors that can go to the red and go to the blue real fast, you know, depending, you know, getting a blue purple or getting a red purple. But it's always great when you're, it's like I've got a lot of yellow in here. So purple's the complement. And it's like I'm going to throw some purple in the shadow here. See how that works. Just to give it a little bit of a it'll sparkle a little bit more when you've got complements baiting each other. So I'm just putting in just a couple of little hints, and when they dry, the purple won't show that much, but it'll show enough just to give it that nice, what it is, it's a complement to the yellow, because there's a lot of yellow in there. And then I'm going to throw just a hint of alizarin crimson in the ears.
Still filming?
And just put a little bit more there. And I think what I'm going to do, just as a hair, I'm going to take just a little bit of burnt sienna, just to throw a little bit of red into the coat, so it gives it a feeling of a little bit of a reflected light. And that'll roll. There we go. And that's it. That's it for our African wild dogs. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Llyn Hunter, Llynhunter. You can find me on Patreon. If you like the video, please like it. Subscribe to my channel. I will be turning out a new... Appreciate your watching.